Pause the video and think about how you would answer these questions. Considering the phenomenon of multilingualism, we can distinguish a number of approaches to the interpretation of its essence and classification of its types. In particular, an Austrian linguist Wondrushka argues that multilingualism is a characteristic property of every person, because even with only their native language, a person uses a variety of its options, in particular literary, colloquial, dialect, jargon, etc. The researcher calls this phenomenon internal multilingualism, which, in turn, is opposed by external multilingualism as the ability to assimilate and apply foreign languages. Wondrushka also interprets the concept of foreign language in a rather peculiar way, denoting not only the language of another community, but also an unknown version of the native language, for example, dialect or professional jargon. The Swiss linguist Ludi identifies three types of multilingualism, in particular, individual, territorial and institutional. The term individual multilingualism is used to refer to a person's ability to use multiple languages as a means of communication. To indicate the specifics of the functioning of languages and their use in multilingual countries or regions, the scholar uses the concept of territorial multilingualism. The concept of institutional multilingualism, according to him, serves to refer to the situation of using a number of languages at the institutional level within one state or interstate associations. The researcher emphasizes that all these types of multilingualism are in close relationship and interdependence. Issues of social, territorial, institutional, multilingualism became the object of research of French sociolinguists Coste and Hebrard in their work towards plurilingualism, School and Language Policy, 1991. They focused primarily on the peculiarities of the functioning of languages and their use in a multilingual society. As a result of their work, they distinguish two types of social multilingualism: hierarchical and juxtapositional. Juxtaposition, a combination of several words in one complex word. An example of the first type is the linguistic situation in France, where the French language dominates all spheres of society, while other languages, regardless of their status, regional languages, languages of national minorities, etc., despite the absence of any prohibitions on their use, remain subordinate to it. An example of the second type is the Swiss phenomenon of the four languages. British linguist Cook, as a result of studies of individual multilingualism, proved that a multilingual person has a significantly higher level of cognitive development and a wider outlook compared to monolinguals. The concept of multi-competence was introduced to denote a unique form of communicative competence of a multilingual person, which should not be considered as a simple set of communicative competencies in several languages, but should be interpreted as a complex, integral structure, constantly changing under the influence of many factors. In the linguistic consciousness of the individual, all elements of languages are included in a single system, the proof of which is the presence in the minds of students of a single conceptual dictionary, the ability to alternately use different languages, the existence of unified physiological mechanisms of mental organization for all languages. Canadian scholar Bialystock studied the functioning of the cognitive sphere of multilingual individuals of different age periods, which made it possible to identify the influence of multilingualism on the activity of cognitive structures during several life stages. As a result of research activities, it was confirmed that multilingualism supports the activity of brain functions and delays the aging process of the brain. This positive influence is due to the competitive nature of information processing, the need to constantly choose from two systems. Knowledge of several languages is more than just owning two ways of speaking, because the brain of a bilingual person has two linguistic ways of conceptual representation. Bialystock suggests that the enriching effect may occur precisely because of its complexity, in particular because the structures and concepts of different languages never completely coincide. Hufeisen and Gessner created the basis for understanding multilingualism as a phenomenon of the individual psyche and awareness of neurophysiological and mental factors important for the successful formation of multilingualism, including an individual attitude to the process of learning languages, their motivation, the ability to master language information, strategic skills to solve cognitive and communicative problems, the level of development of metalinguistic consciousness. They also found significant differences in the mechanisms of mastering a second foreign language compared to the first one, which, in turn, is caused by the presence of experience in learning a non-native language, awareness of personal cognitive style, the formation of foreign language competence, etc. Presenting various definitions of the concept of individual multilingualism, researchers point to a variety of its types and forms. Borsch considers general level of language acquisition as minimum, elementary level of language proficiency, but sufficient for everyday communication, maximum, fluency in languages. Riemer studies degree of mastering the languages as symmetrical, the same level of communicative competence in all languages, and asymmetric, different levels of language proficiency, and method of language acquisition as simultaneous mastering of several languages, and successional, alternate mastering of several languages. Dagmar Abendroth-Timmer and Stefan Breidbach analyze conditions for learning and using languages as natural, mastered in real conditions, for example, in a multilingual family, without formal training, and artificial, acquired as a result of systematic school foreign language education. Edwards analyses nature of language use as receptive or passive, understanding of speech and speech elements, and productive or active, understanding and reproduction of speech and speech elements. Skutnab Kangas considers the problem of linguogenocide, the disappearance of certain languages, primarily minority languages, from the language map of the world due to the purposeful language policy of a number of states. Instead, diversity is considered the only acceptable form of human existence, which should be expressed both in the way of life, the political system, culture, and in language. The author does not see any future for a single world language, since this can lead to complete universalization, and therefore to infringement of the human right to free use of languages. The linguistic diversity of the world is the starting point of multilingualism, which is the key to successful contacts between representatives of different linguistic communities. An important role is assigned in the preservation and development of numerous languages to a properly organized system of language and foreign language education. De Groote Net considers bilingualism as the individual's use of two languages in the form of balanced bilingualism, the same level of proficiency in both languages, or dominant, one language dominates the other, age of language acquisition as early, assimilation of both languages in childhood, or late, assimilation of the second language at an older age, sequence of bilingualism formation, assimilation of both languages simultaneously or one after another, use of languages as active. Bilingualism, use of both languages, and passive, mastering two languages with active use of only one. According to the method of mastering the language, spontaneous, natural, and pedagogical, cultural, ways are distinguished. Mohanty and Perigos define bilinguals as those who speak at least two languages with possibly very different degrees of professionalism in them, thus eliminating the strict limitations of the early definitions that emphasized the assimilation of both languages from birth. Joshua Fishman considered coordinating bilingualism, the same use of languages, which happens rarely, subordinative, more common. One of the languages is more convenient, easier, more functional for the speaker and is used more willingly, natural. Inherent in those speakers who grew up in a bilingual family, where the mother speaks the language L1, and the father, L2, it is no coincidence that the numbers are assigned, because the language spoken by the mother is remembered by the child up to 3 years better than the language spoken by the father, even if the parents communicate with the baby equally often. The exception to the rule is only those situations where the language of society, L3, is equal to the language of L2, and situational. When successful socialization in the kindergarten, school, work, etc. can occur only if a person learns the language of society. Joshua Fishman singled out folk bilinguals, minority linguistic groups whose language does not have a high status in the dominant linguistic society in which they are located, and elite bilinguals, those who speak a dominant language in a given society and a language that gives them added value in this society. Valdez considers circumstantial and volitional bilinguals. And here is the time to mention the term diglossia. It is in this domains, the individual and the social, that the interests of these terms intersect and a misunderstanding arises. Where is what and what is the difference between them? Bilingualism is possible within the smallest social unit, the family, and diglossia is a phenomenon of wider interaction. A single individual does not need diglossia. This is the language in which we speak to strangers in order to look belonging to their group and get what we want. Diglossia is when a speaker knows that some language is high and some is low. These may not be different languages, but variants of one. To put it very simply, high speech is the speech of a BBC announcer, and low speech is how she would talk to her friends in the pub after her third pint of beer. As soon as the announcer appears on the camera, they will again switch to reading the news mode and speak in a high register. William Marquet, studying Arabic languages, noted that multilingual groups switch to an economically beneficial language or an invariant of the language when it is necessary to manage something, to buy, sell, or agree on something. Diglossia is the choice of communication language made in manual mode. It is always meaningful and conscious. It does not depend on language preferences, but only on the demands of society at a specific moment. We resort to diglossia practices and strategies every day. This is a kind of linguistic mimicry that we need in order to belong or at least appear to belong to some group. Bilingual education is education when two languages are used in the learning process, native, first, and state or foreign, second. The forms of using both languages, as well as the types of didactic materials and their language are not regulated, but the level must correspond to the average language competence of the respective groups. Bilingual studying process involves the simultaneous use of two languages in the work on one or another subject, state and native, when they do not coincide, state and foreign, etc. Bilingual studying process is used in one, several or all subjects of the curriculum. Yakovleva analyses bilingualism as a trend of social development in the conditions of globalization. While Benhabib emphasizes the negative aspect of such processes, because, according to the researcher, globalization leads to the fragmentation and localization of cultures. As Holubowska states, in contrast to bilingualism, plurilingualism is the ability of an individual to use more than two languages, the language practice of society to use more than two national languages in one or different spheres of communication, and the phenomenon of social coexistence of more than two languages of the community in a multilingual country. However, it is not only the ability to speak several languages, but also a special type of thinking that reflects the cultural values of several civilizations, a thinking that is open to dialogue. We should keep in mind that the above-mentioned categories of characteristics of the phenomenon of bilingualism, focalite bilinguals, circumstantial volitional, balanced dominant, etc., can be transferred to situations of plurilingualism, but, of course, taking into account the focus of the analysis on more than two languages. The problem of social multilingualism in scholarly literature is presented as the multilingualism of a certain territorial or geopolitical structure, a city, region, country, as well as the political regulation of the language situation. The socio-psychological dimension involves the study of the peculiarities of the functioning of languages in different language communities within society. Haskelberg points to the fact that almost a quarter of the world's countries have two official languages on their territory, and a small number of countries have three or more such languages. Binders also emphasizes that multilingual speakers outnumber monolinguals and stresses the importance of implementing the European language policy regarding foreign languages, two compulsory foreign languages in school, in Ukraine in the context of its pro-European development vector. In a multilingual community, the ratio of languages can change in favor of one or another language. If the appropriate conditions are created, one language can partially degrade, negatively affect another, interference, stop developing, be pushed out of use, language change, be forgotten, go out of usage, death of language, or, on the contrary, the language can be revived, supported, preserved, brought to the level of official recognition and use. Senos considers multilingualism as a phenomenon determined by historical circumstances, as the existence of several official languages in one country, for example, in Canada, Switzerland, as the coexistence of several ethnic languages dominating everyday communication in one country, as one state language, such as state and ethnic languages, as in Ukraine, Britain, Spain, and emigrant multilingualism. Migrants are looking for ways to interact with the society in which they find themselves. Multilingualism as a general social competence for understanding behavior patterns in different cultural contexts is considered in the works of Shuri. In the Ukrainian language, the broadest concept is probably bahatomовність, which encompasses both the aspect of the coexistence of languages in a certain territory and the mastery of two or more languages by an individual or a certain group. Luke notes that the term plurilingualism as a dynamic relationship between languages and cultures is more specific to the French-speaking context, while multilingualism is more common in English. The main principle of plurilingualism is the impossibility of separate coexistence of languages, while multilingualism only means the plurality of languages in a given territory, as suggested by Picardo. In the European Charter of Plurilingualism, plurilingualism is identified as the mastery of several languages by one person, while multilingualism, the coexistence of several languages on the same territory within the limits of one social group. A plurilingual society may speak several languages at different levels of linguistic competence, while a multilingual society may consist of monolingual people who do not speak other languages. In a word, Europe, like Ukraine, is a multilingual society, as there are many languages on its territory. And within their communities, there are both plurilingual and monolingual citizens. Thus, in the program documents of the Council of Europe, plurilingualism is a language competence, the ability to use more than one language, and multilingualism is the presence of different languages in a certain geographical region. But in the EU, the term multilingualism is used to denote both of the above-mentioned concepts. A synonym for the term plurilingualism is the term polyglottism, but it has a narrower application, the possession of three or more languages. Polyglots are those who specifically study foreign languages and practice their knowledge, etc. That is, it is about artificial, willed multilingualism. Panasiuk notes that plurilingualism is not only the mastery of certain languages, but also a reflection of a special type of thinking that combines the possessions of different cultures and ethnicities and is closely related to multiculturalism. The researcher notes that plurilingualism can be voluntary, mastering one or more foreign languages, which does not imply a significant social difference between knowing and not knowing a foreign language, and not learning it does not lead to a life crisis, or forced, mastering foreign languages, which historically developed in the territory of the person's residence. Due to Masenko language situation denotes the real position of language in society. It characterizes the socio-communicative system in a certain period of its functioning and is one of the key terms in multilingualism research. This is a set of forms of existence of one language or a set of languages that are used within certain geographical regions or administrative and political entities to meet the communicative needs of their population. Monolingual and multilingual language situations are distinguished depending on whether the linguistic formations are different languages or subsystems of the same language, homogeneous and heterogeneous, which are determined by the relatedness-unrelatedness of languages. Homomorphic and heteromorphic, distinguished on the basis of typological similarity of languages. Balanced and unbalanced language situations, which are understood to mean the same or different functional meaning of both languages within a certain socio-communicative system. The exoglossal language situation, a set of different languages, as opposed to an endoglossic one, a set of territorial and social dialects of the same language, which can also become unbalanced, gives rise to linguistic rivalry and linguistic conflicts in the state. Due to the decrease in demographics and communication capacity, the weaker language is gradually losing its importance, which may eventually lead to its complete disappearance. Now I will ask you 4 questions, pause after each of them, and when you are ready present your answers. 1. Try to remember the difference between multilingualism, bilingualism, and plurilingualism. 2. Can you share personal experiences or examples that highlight the advantages of multilingualism in today's globalized world? 3. How does polyglottism differ from plurilingualism, and what are the practical implications of being a polyglot? 4. Explore the challenges individuals might face in maintaining proficiency in multiple languages. How can these challenges be addressed?